Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. That all depends on when you are deciding to watch this. So, today is Tuesday, April 13th, and this is in case you missed Psychology 1. If you're watching this, that means that you couldn't get to class today for some reason, and that's okay. I hope you're well. Hope those around you are well, and I hope that you had just the right amount of productive asynchronous learning day yesterday. So, sorry, a little scratchy. The purpose of this video is to run you through everything that we did today if you were unable to make the class. So, without further delay, we're going to get rolling. So some quick reminders and some new business. First of all, I wanted to say thank you, some kudos. I don't know where that term comes from, but a thank you. I gave you guys an assignment last week on Monday, and it was due Monday by midnight. And for the first time in this virtual year, every one of you guys handed it in. Okay. That's actually a big deal to me. You guys are the first group where everybody got their assignment done and everybody got it done on time. Actually, they're all already graded and in the grade book. I gave you guys feedback, put them in IC. Remember, with that feedback, you can just choose to use it for next time if you want to, or you could look at, if your grade's lower than 4s, you could look at, can I use this to make my grade higher? Go back in, fix, resubmit. I'll regrade. Okay. But again, thank you for that. It makes my life a lot easier when people do the things they're supposed to do and do them well. Okay. Now on the new business side of things, we do have a test this Friday on this first chapter on, what is psychology? So basically what we're going to do this week is we are going to use Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to wrap up the unit. Today, we're going to look at jobs in psychology. Tomorrow, we're going to look at the goals of psychology and a little brief history of psychology. And then on Thursday, we're going to look at the major approaches or major problem-solving methods in psychology. And then Friday is going to be test day. Friday, we'll come in, we'll do a little quick review. And then I'm going to give you the test. I'm going to give you the whole time to work on it. So that's going to be your deal for that day. Okay. Monday is going to be a testing day. So there is a new assignment today. That assignment is going to be due on Monday by midnight. Again, I'm going to give you pretty much a full week to get that thing done. Yeah, so if you have questions, please make sure and let me know. I'm more than happy to help, and don't want you to be confused, so reach out if you need to. All right, let's get rolling. So today what we did is we looked at careers, looked at jobs in psychology. And we talk about jobs in psychology. One of the things that's really important to understand is there's a lot of different jobs. There's a lot of different fields, a lot of different sub areas, some pretty different, pretty out there. You can work for Hallmark and help figure out what card would make somebody think that you really wanted them to get well, or that you were feeling bad that they were leaving their job. Or you could become a pet psychologist and try to decide why someone's dog keeps pooping on their neighbor's yard rather than yours. You could go to work for an automotive company and decide not only how to help people get the most enjoyment out of their car purchase, but also where's the best place in the car to put the high beam thing to turn your high beam headlights on. So there's a lot of different things you can do within psychology. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, all jobs in psychology fall into one of two classifications. You are either a research psychologist or you are an applied psychologist. Now, if you're a research psychologist, what you do is you use your educational background and your career in psychology to study the origin of the causes and the results of behavior. And really what you're doing is you're doing experiments, surveys, interviews, naturalistic observations, all these things that we're going to talk about in the next chapter to collect data about the behavior of a target group of individuals. Now, that target group could be students in a high school classroom. It could be people working in a factory. It could be test subjects. It could be gorillas in the wild, okay? But those people are going to be doing research on the why. They aren't necessarily going to do anything with that research. Their job is to come up with the data. An example of this could be a neuropsychologist, someone who studies the brain for a living and in the central nervous system to try to decide the hows of behavior. How is it that we see red as red and not as something else? How is it that we can tell if one sound is high pitched versus one that is low pitched? Okay. And so research psychologists, they're doing the grunt work in science. Then you have the applied psychologists. They're on the front line. They use existing data or someone else's studies to work directly with patients, clients, students, whoever it might be. So these people are more likely to be working one-on-one or one on a group with a direct clientele. Okay. Now, for instance, in this group you could have someone who is a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is taking the known data or the collected data and is trying to help exact some kind of change in behavior or more consistency in behavior. Now, it is possible that you can have a little bit of both. For instance, like psychology teachers sometimes do research and they apply it. Psychiatrists, will sometimes run studies on their own people while trying to apply what they've learned to new people. But there are psychiatrists out there that literally just work directly with patients and use everyone else's work to get there. Now, one example of a little bit more practical that isn't a psychiatrist or a neuroscientist or neuropsychologist is that a chunk of years ago, it's probably been 25 years ago, because it was when I was in college, a high school in central Wisconsin, which is not that far from here, decided they wanted to do a study about why their students were showing a lack of attention and why they were falling asleep in class and why they weren't being very productive during work. It's generally why the school day was such a struggle. And so what they did is they hired a firm of people who basically did a psychological study on their school. And within that study, they sent out two different groups of people, research psychologists and applied psychologists, to help solve this problem. And so what the research psychologists did, sorry, my eyes are a little dry. The research psychologists came out to the school and they spent the better part of a month doing various kinds of research on the school, from temperature readouts to caloric counts in the food, sitting in classrooms and participating in classes, to teaching a class or two. They interviewed kids, they interviewed parents, they interviewed administrators and teachers. They basically did every kind of science that you can do within a school without being invasive. And they compiled that data. And then, according to the version of the story I was told by an educator, they brought these people back to talk to the teachers in the afternoon and then to talk to the school board at night. And basically the reasons why kids weren't as actively engaged in their education, why they were falling asleep in class, why they were complaining about the length of class time, was laid out in a number of different steps. Now, if you are thinking class is boring, that was not in the list. That's subjective. It may be true, but it didn't end up in the study. The first reason was that, and this one I think is pretty universally close to correct, is that the average person at the school, student-wise, was not getting enough sleep. We don't get enough sleep, you don't function at your best, you become really tired, you're more easily bored, you're more easily distracted, and therefore, bam, that 8 to 10 hours of sleep is important. But some of the other findings that they presented to the school board I thought were very, very interesting. For instance, they said that it was too warm in the classrooms. The heat at the average of the school was 70 degrees. They suggested turning it down closer to 60 degrees because that would make the body work harder and would make students more active in moving around to stay warm and therefore more likely to be alert. They believed that the color that the walls were painted in the school did not help. Now, this is not white. This is what is known as institutional gray around me. I think it's the cheapest paint color you can buy. I think it covers well, but institutional gray is pretty bland and pretty vanilla. They suggested painting the walls brighter colors like red and yellow and green and orange, and really making things mentally stimulating. They suggested that the seats, as I wiggle all over, were too comfortable, that the chairs and the desks and the stools in the school were more likely to allow kids to, crash out and fall asleep than they were to help keep them awake. Okay. There were too many calories in the lunch, too carb heavy, and therefore you were having like a food coma when you got done. And so on and so forth. But most of the things were not exactly what you have necessarily thought they were going to be. And so the school board took this study and invested some money in some different things, but then, to the best of my knowledge, never did a follow-up to see if the situation got any better. But the people that came in and did the research were research psychologists. The people that came in and talked to the teachers and the school board about how to make the learning of the school better are applied psychologists. They're applying the learning. Now, our next slide is more of a graphic than anything. This kind of sets up where do most psychologists work. Now, the independent practice group, the 5.7% in independent practice, that's a pretty big variety of what those people are doing. Now, some psychologists didn't necessarily get counted in this count. You take like the people that are dog psychologists or dog whisperers. They don't necessarily make this graph. But when you look at this, you see that there's kind of two areas where a lot of psychologists work. And that is in the education field and then in like the hospital mental health care sector of things. When you start combining together the hospital part and the education part, you get roughly 40% each. And so colleges especially are a large employer of psychologists, with slightly over a quarter of psychologists working for college, or psychologists working in colleges. I believe if I trust my research from the fall, the largest psychology departments in the country were at the Ohio State University and Stanford, where they employ a large number of psychologists, not just for teaching, but also for the mental health and well-being of their students and professors. A number of psychologists work in medical schools, and then you have the white section, which is schools and other educational. Technically, I fit in that part of things. Mrs. Marnaka, who works in the office, fits in that part of things. And so when you add those all together, you're talking about 40%. About 5.7% work in independent practices. And then you've got 25% that work in hospitals and another 16% that work in government and VA medical centers. So these people are offering mental health care to patients, to veterans, to people who are overcoming an illness for themselves, or they're dealing with a loved one overcoming an illness. The last 10.4% work for the government, which are very, very well paid. Work for businesses or nonprofits. Business psychologists can be a very profitable job because you're working for major corporations, figuring out how to make their product more marketable or better for the customer. The nonprofit end of things, that doesn't always pay as well. This can be grief counselors that work for the American Cancer Society and other similar roles. Now, the one thing I left out in the green section where it says government, there are psychologists that do things like read important politicians' speeches to make sure that their word choices are going to appeal to both sides of the political spectrum that we have in our country. All right. So if you go into psychology, you're a lot less likely to be in that black slice of the pie than you think. That's where a lot of people believe that most psychologists work, is the tell me about your problems, tell me about your dreams, counseling kind of things. But that in reality, that is not the truth. Okay. Now, I wanted to look at some popular jobs in psychology. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, but I think that'll be effective in helping you. A vocational counselor is a growing job in psychology, although I don't know if this is one that I would recommend going into, because this is so overwhelmingly becoming a computer-based thing. A vocational counselor helps you to figure out what job or career path is best for you. And so what they do is they use a number of different tools like surveys and questionnaires to figure out what your skill set is, what you're good at, where your growth potential is. They would also teach you how to best apply for the job, what to do at the interview, how to set up your LinkedIn, how to scrub your social media so that people are not thinking negatively about you because of that. Another growing field is a school psychologist. Given the mental health issues that we have in various aspects of our society, it's only logical that schools would have a need for these people. Not only do things come up in the regular everyday, day-to-day, but also they run groups for students, like smoking cessation groups and things. But also school psychologists can sometimes see students when maybe they can't get into a healthcare professional because of busy schedules, or, obviously money can be an issue there, or insurance. Very popular among college students right now, which makes me worry about the job field a little bit, is forensic psychologists. Forensic psychologists are what you see on TV. Now, not every day is CSI or Bones or Criminal Minds, but they help the police solve crimes. They can look at crime scenes and make personality sketches of the people that might be involved. They can help interrogate people that are involved in crimes or witnesses to get the most out of them. And sometimes in the law enforcement industry, they use psychologists to help prep potential witnesses for court cases. Okay. Engineering psychologists often work for businesses. They are the kind of people that are trying to figure out the where should this go to make people feel the best about their product. And so you take things as simple as clicky pens, or where the radio controls go on your car, or basically how to make people feel more comfortable about the big decisions made with buildings, for instance. Go. Clinical psychologists work with patients. These can be everybody from marriage counselors to mental health professionals, to people who are grief counselors. Obviously, this is a pretty wide-ranging job. Okay. And last but not least, sports psychologists go into the field because they want to work with teams or athletes to help their performance, to help them come back from injuries, both mentally and physically, to help them deal with the media in effective ways. Sometimes teams will hire sports psychologists to help players get over issues with drugs and alcohol, public issues like some of the different things we've seen athletes go through. Now, obviously, each one of these jobs has a varying amount of education. What I usually tell people when it comes to education and psychology is if you're looking into going into a psychology-related job, your undergraduate degree is only going to get you so far. If you go to college and you major in psychology, you are not qualified to do a ton of these things right away at a large level or at a high income level. You are probably going to have to go to grad school and get a master's in specific areas. And in some areas, you're going to want to seek out a PhD. For instance, if you would want to be a psychiatrist, a clinical psychologist who can also prescribe medication, you are looking at going to medical school. And so the demands do vary on the education based on what you think you're going to do. So if you are interested in any of these careers or a career in psychology, I do advise you to do a couple of things. Look into what the expected amount of schooling is to get an entry-level job or to then move up the food chain. Also look into what are the best colleges for these things in your area. Oftentimes, I think almost every UW school offers a psychology major, but then when you go to grad school and you want to go into these specific things, or if you want to be a school psychologist, you want to make sure that you find a good fit for you and a program that has a good reputation for not only quality education, but also job placement. Okay. Now, with the rest of your time today, I think you'll see that I posted something called Chapter 1 Crash Course. We'll click on that so you guys can see what's going on. It's about a 13-minute crash course video that runs you through some of these big topics, including structuralism and functionalism, which came up in the first homework assignment a little bit more. There are 9 questions that go along with this. Those will be answered in complete sentences with great vocabulary, grammar, capitalization, and punctuation. And will be due Monday by midnight. Now, if you have any questions, please make sure and let me know. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.